Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by GrandTheftWorld.com. It's December 26th, 2022. We're in the last week of 2022. This is episode 112. We're going to break into the last week of news. We're going to see what happened in the world of Grand Theft news. There's all this news out there about the Grand Theft of pretty much everything. You see from the Twitter files, we'll get into in a second. There's all sorts of different agencies in the government, all up in everyone's business. But a lot of you just went through Christmas vacation. Christmas is a time that comes once a year. A lot of you might have been looking on the Santa tracker, seeing when Santa's going to come deliver those gifts down the chimney. Well, if you're looking over here at Bill Gates, he's got a tracker too. And even though it's a story we talked about a couple weeks ago in brief, brevity, Redacted just put out a new report on how Bill Gates is tracking the next pandemic. It's coming to us in 2025. It's called Sears and their exercise. It's much like their Event 201 exercise from a couple years ago. So we're going to take a look at that report tonight.
Let's talk about Bill Gates and the next pandemic. Bill Gates and the World Health Organization have announced when we will see the next pandemic. You'll remember Bill Gates and the World Health Organization previously held what was known as the 2001 Event 201. And it was about the Event 201 exercise. It was a simulation involving a coordinated global response to a coronavirus that they held in a simulation just months before COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. So they're pretty good at predicting this stuff.
Officials in 2 Latin American countries alerted the WHO of several outbreaks of a new infectious disease that's mysteriously appearing across the region. Severe Epidemic Enterovirus Respiratory Syndrome 2025. Over the past 6 weeks alone, there have been 500 confirmed or suspected cases reported. The virus could cause a severe pandemic if early containment and mitigation efforts are not successful.
The pandemic in this type of situation and trend would be a risk for the global health security.
Pandemics are inherently political, financial, and so much broader.
We have not spoken on the leadership in country. And I think that we need to be also very careful. We cannot decide a lot of things without the leaders be involved and agree on that.
There is no substitute for national leadership.
It's important to support the local response or the national response.
Training those that are in these areas first, enabling them with the tools, protecting them, and if needs be, regional solidarity first.
At this stage, communication is key, and communication should include not just scientists with data, but also social, religious, and political leaders.
Trust. This is an essential issue, and trust was broken among countries, between populations and healthcare systems, between healthcare systems and governments.
I'm very sorry to say that in 2025, we need to strengthen the health system.
WHO needs to be a voice for the voiceless.
No one is safe until all of us are safe.
As of today, there have been an estimated 1 billion cases worldwide, with more than 20 million deaths, including nearly 15 million children. Countless millions are alive, but left with paralysis or brain damage. The most successful countries are those which invested in preparedness and trained for this moment years in advance. This included having full-time pandemic preparedness and response teams, which conducted detailed operational planning and routinely tested those plans through exercises and drills. If more countries had participated and heeded the guidance, the toll might have been much less.
And, all these other tech billionaires that we got to keep an eye on, like Elon Musk. We're also going to look into the fact that we ended the show last week and he had put up a tweet that said, should I step down from Twitter? And it's a Democratic vote, and he's going to abide by those choices. And by the next morning, Elon says he's going to step down from Twitter. So that's something I wish we would have covered on the show last week. It was breaking. We could have covered it at the end, probably at 4 a.m. when that was going on. But it's a new event because this guy who bought the $44 billion crime scene is now going to step down as CEO. CEO has yet to be appointed, so who knows how long before he'll step down. But in the midst of that, you have all these Twitter files being dropped. And what we found out are things in the past week, been several Twitter files since the last episode of Grand Theft World, found out things like the FBI had 80 plus people just watching memes on Facebook because, I don't know, they like memes. So they have all these, resources to look into things like that. No resources to look into Hunter Biden's laptop. No resources to look into all these Ghislaine Maxwell client lists. No time for that. They're over there watching memes. We also saw some Fauci leaks earlier today. We're going to get into that later tonight. Fauci Files continued. Government working with social media tech giants to suppress the free wills and free expression of citizens of the United States. That censorship cost a lot of lives.
Well, the latest Twitter files dump, which is apparently the 10th if we're counting, reveals efforts from both the Biden and Trump White Houses to suppress ideas on social media related to COVID-19. According to independent journalist David Zweig, quote, Twitter did suppress views, many from doctors and scientific experts, that conflicted with the official positions of the White House. Adding, dissident yet legitimate content was labeled as misinformation, and the accounts of doctors and others were suspended.
On to our top story. In what's called proof, the Twitter files reveal that the FBI paid Twitter millions of dollars to censor the free speech of Americans. $3.4 million to be exact. This breaks down as follows. The FBI doesn't generate any of its own revenue because it's worthless. Therefore, it relies on tax money for all of its operations, which is paid by you. The FBI then used your money to pay Twitter employees to censor you. That's the federal government directly infringing on your constitutional freedoms. But the good news is that while you were paying the FBI to do so, they were also using more of your money to pay Twitter to help them do it. And as you know, it was all for your protection. Trust us. So what does the FBI have to say about it all? Well, in a released statement, the FBI explained their innocence by saying, "It is unfortunate that conspiracy theorists and others are feeding the American public misinformation with the sole purpose of attempting to discredit the agency." Well, that should clarify everything. When you have irrefutable proof, what you actually have is misinformation. And the people who reveal that proof are conspiracy theorists. That's the simple truth, and it's certainly not gaslighting. And it's certainly not gaslighting for us to tell you that it's not gaslighting.
In an adjacent story on limitations of free speech, Stanford University came out and said, here's a list of words you can't say anymore. Not allowed to say these words. One of those words is American. What happens to a group of people if they can't use the word that allows them to attach to their identity? If people consider themselves to be Americans and they can no longer openly say, hey, I'm an American. And you can't say things like that's the American flag, or it's as American as apple pie, mom and apple pie, these sort of things. Well, I think those limitations are the ultimate form of weakness, and it's the death rattle of the university system making itself heard by everybody around the world. And with all these universities preventing people from getting in to their indoctrination system because they're not jabbed up with a experimental concoction brought to you by multi-billionaire type of crime lords at those pharma companies. I think that the death of that university system has been in the making. They made it themselves. There's no longer a need for their services. So we're going to learn why Stanford might want to ban words. And unless it's a clever PR campaign to get people to go there, I don't see that as being a wise thing to do these days.
And woke culture thinks they can rewire your brain.
That's academic. They all think
do it.
Language is the basis of everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a weird perversion of I'm not perversion, but Noam Chomsky is a linguist.
Yeah.
There's a real strong idea of like, oh, you just change the language. You can't even have thoughts I don't want you to have.
So here are some of the words they want to switch around. So instead of saying walk in office hours or walk up support hours, you can see the problem with that, Kurt.
Okay.
Some people can't walk.
Okay.
So a person who uses a wheelchair can't walk in or walk up. So consider using open office hours or on-site support hours. I think the people in the wheelchairs get it.
You know, that's probably the most reasonable one I've ever heard of all of it. Like they're like, hey, we're just going to change this. All right. I mean, I guess
I could. Okay. Yeah, that was insane. This term trivializes the experiences of people living with mental health conditions. No, it doesn't.
You know what? Phobias are a mental health condition. You can throw around everybody's a phobia.
Everyone's a phobic.
And trivialize it all you want for some reason.
Consider using words such as surprising or wild.
That wild's going to go next. There's no way you're going to keep wild.
There's no way you can keep wild. X holds the tribal knowledge around here. The term trivializes the ancestral knowledge handed down through generations of it. So tribal knowledge you're not supposed to say? So consider using the phrase institutional knowledge.
You know what else is obnoxious about this? First of all, no, it doesn't trivialize it. And the very idea that you would have the power in your office to trivialize generations of handed down knowledge is so arrogant. Like, to think that that's how arrogant they're. Like, we set the standard of what everything is.
So can you go to this computer here? What's the other one?
Brownie.
Go to Brownie. So take Kurt off. And so here is, this is at their PDF or whatever, Elimination of Harmful Language Initiative. The Elimination of Harmful Language Initiative is a multi-phase, multi-year project to address harmful language in IT at Stanford. So here's a word. Instead of, it's not up here. So instead of saying addict, you should say person with substance use disorder.
Wait, an addict? That's not a disability.
No, it's much easier just to say addict. And you're right, it's not a disability. Using person-first language helps to not define people by just one of their characteristics.
You know, as an addict, that offends me.
So the next word is addicted. How about you say hooked or devoted? Because saying addicted trivializes the experience of people who deal with substance abuse issues.
What?
How?
I used to be really devoted to OxyContin.
Now, we also have stories this week like The Economist. Now, of course, if you're an educated person, you like finance, you like economics, you're going to read The Economist. The Economist is a journal, you could say. It's written in a collective voice. It has some very interesting ownership behind The Economist. They came out and they're talking about brain chips as a wave of the future. So we might want to look into that. And in parallel, that guy that owns Twitter, he's got that Neuralink project, right? And a whole bunch of DARPA Starlink money going on. So beware what these people are putting together in their various pieces. They might take those pieces and assemble them into something much bigger.
Imagine computers that can read your mind. And brain implants that control computers by thought alone.
Everybody is fascinated about the idea of potentially being able to control things just using their mind.
This technology could revolutionize everything, from astronauts in space to care for the severely paralyzed.
He'll save his life by turning himself into the world's first cyborg.
The gap between the virtual and real worlds is closing. But how long till headsets and screens disappear?
This is not the real world.
And the Matrix is no longer fiction. Invasive BCIs can also pose ethical and health risks for humans.
So they actually have to cut your skull open and then implant an electrode and then put the skull back on.
Despite this, many consider these implants to be the most promising path to removing the gap between the virtual and real worlds.
The most accurate tend to be the ones that are implanted in the brain. The upside is that you're reading directly from neural populations, so the cells in the brain that are actually firing.
Invasive BCIs have the potential to integrate human biology with technology in unprecedented ways. And scientists are slowly moving in this direction.
Also on the horizon for tonight, the Club of Rome or a Cult of Doom. We have a Jason Burmis report that looks into these people that brought about the World Economic Forum, because the Club of Rome was up here. It was a think tank that created as its way to move a project forward, the World Economic Forum, which brings you things like Davos.
The limits of growth by the United Nations. This was a free service. That's in the Pennsylvania Public Library's Film Center. Oh, thank you so much, State of Pennsylvania. 1973, here it is. It's got that nice old-timey vintage feel, everybody.
Our riches and our numbers burden the world.
time, then, growth is not stopped by a resource crisis. Our family grows richer, consuming more and more goods. The factories producing these goods are also producing pollution. This time it is pollution that halts growth in catastrophe.
To keep growing, we need more raw materials. If we find those materials, growth continues till we die of pollution.
See that? So again, no matter what, we die. We die. No matter what, we die. Even if we find all the resources, which we have an abundance of resources on this planet. We are a smart and ingenuitive species. We can not only maintain or sustain, we can thrive. Again, that's not on the agenda. Eventually, pollution will get you.
But we could control pollution. Indeed, we are already beginning to do so. We know how to clean up our water and air. The pollution created by technology can be restrained by technology. So in the next run, they assumed not only that we had solved our raw materials difficulties, but that we had controlled pollution as well.
More Club of Rome paperwork.
So resources still run down slowly. Industry can expand. Pollution, now controlled, doesn't become a problem. Growth is progressing. But this time, the population grows so large that food becomes a problem. Food production cannot keep pace with population. People starve. And industrial society collapses.
I love how the United Nations has always used the guise of caring about starving populations for their agenda, when one of the things we discussed earlier is the fact that we could feed the planet and we have failed to do so, and that exposes bare their agenda.
The FBI's official explanation of the Twitter files with respect to them actually paying Twitter $3 million to censor people, the FBI said that was a conspiracy theory. So we're going to break into all these conspiracy theories as we go through the show tonight.
I have a tweet from Carl Benjamin because he had a great one. So we have the statement from the FBI on Twitter. They say, breaking. The FBI responds to the Twitter files claiming that their own leaked communications with Twitter are misinformation to discredit the agency. They said, it is unfortunate that conspiracy theorists and others are feeding the American public misinformation with the sole purpose of attempting to discredit the agency. Carl Benjamin of the Lotus Eaters podcast says, oh, I forgot that I was just a conspiracy theorist and the FBI didn't collude with Twitter to suppress the New York Post's Hunter Biden laptop story that I watched happen in real time and then read the files which show them discussing it. My lying eyes keep deceiving me. This is real life, okay? It's unraveling. We know they did it. We know they're doing it. We have the proof they did it, and they're just coming out and lying, saying they didn't do it.
We're going to juxtapose all these good conspiracy theories to the evidence, the artifacts, and the history that brings all these events about. So without further ado, let's kick off tonight's show with Luke Rudowski from wearechange.org, thebestpoliticalshirts.com, and let's get a little weekly summary, and we'll move along slowly because we have a full show card. It's a holiday week, but there's a lot of news. Let's get started.
I mean, to be totally frank, almost every conspiracy theory that people had about Twitter turned out to be true. So, like, is there a conspiracy theory about Twitter that didn't turn out to be true? So far, they've all turned out to be true. And if not, more true than people thought.
Conspiracy theories are becoming so mainline, we might as well call them spoiler alerts already.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come